Welcome to Food, Wine, and Whiskey, a podcast about having fun conversations on tasty dishes, vinos, and spirits from around the world. Rob is your host. He is an avid home chef, WSET Level 2 award in wine, and a whiskey drinker and collector. Time to set the table. Here's Rob.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode. We appreciate you coming back and being a guest and listening to what we're doing and what we're saying. Today we have another special guest. I say special. He's been on the show a few times, but back is John Fodera from Tuscan Vines. John, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Rob. How are you? Good to be back. Yeah, I've lost track how many times now, but that's okay.
I've stopped counting. I just enjoy our conversations. You're full of knowledge
Yep.
and you're willing to share, and I always appreciate that and try to take advantage when I can.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah.
It's good to be back.
Well, before we get into this topic, which, people see the title, it's the State of Tuscany. So we have a lot to cover, in this region. I always like to give you the opportunity to, tell people who you are, what you do, and where they can find you on the internet.
Sure. So, as Rob said, I'm the owner and publisher of Tuscan Vines. It's a website, dedicated to Italian wine, though it clearly has a focus on wines from Tuscany. In addition to that, I'm also a home chef, so I put all my recipes out on my website. There's probably close to 200 now. I've stopped counting. And in addition to that, and we'll touch on this later, Rob, my partner and I have started running wine and food tours to Tuscany right now every autumn. So we've got 2 of those behind us, and they've been fantastic successes with great feedback, lots of positive feedback. And, the one trip that we have coming in 2024, I think I sold it out in about 2 days. So the word of mouth is spreading, which is great. But it's a personal trip. We only take 12 people, so it's easy to sell it out. But it's very personal, very exclusive, very insider. My partner and I have over, 40 years experience in Tuscany combined. So it's a special trip. And, there's a whole page on my website about that as well. But we're going to talk about that today because, that allowed me some of the insight that we're going to share today.
Yeah, and I want to say when you say 12 people, that's 12 bodies. So if you think about it in couples, which typically these kind of things can be, is 6
Correct.
couples. So it's a small group. It's intimate. It's really enjoying yourself, making new friends, and having access to some really cool stuff, John.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be understated what you just said, because it's really not something that I ever considered when we started this, but the guests have become friends. One thing we do in the event that we need to get in touch with someone, or if someone, wanders off in one of the hill towns and gets lost, is we make sure everyone has WhatsApp on their phone. And we have it's a group chat. So what has typically been happening is, these people, like we just finished the tour in October, but these people are texting through that WhatsApp chat every day. I'm getting messages back and forth that they're talking to each other about food, about wines, about recipes, and just all sorts of interesting things. So they definitely do develop relationships and stay in touch. It's pretty neat.
Yeah. And again, we'll dive a little bit more into what you guys actually do a little bit later in this episode. But to start this episode, I think it would only be right that what's right in front of us. Well, what just happened? Well, that's the 2023 harvest, this vintage from this year. Give us some thoughts. Give us what you saw, what you know. I know it was kind of a tough harvest, a tough season. So kind of tell us what we can expect as wine lovers. What's going to come from this year?
Well, there's not going to be a lot coming, to be honest. It depends where you are in general for some of it. But, the growing season started very poorly. Whenever there is a quick warm up, in early March, mid-March, the vines start waking up, they start growing, they start budding, tender green leaves. Whenever that happens too early, it happened in 2017. There's always the danger of frost once the weather turns cold again, and that's exactly what happened this year. So that was, the end of March, early April. If you were hit by frost, you lost anywhere between 15 and 20% of your possible production right there, because once the vines are frosted, they're done for the season. They're not going to recover. So that was the first thing. Then the second thing was, in Tuscany at least, and a little bit into Barolo, into Piedmont, not quite as much. In May, we were just told everywhere we went, it literally rained every single day. I mean, for 30 some odd days in a row. So the biggest problem with that is mold, fungus, and mildew on the plants. And that just, kills everything. So by May, there's fruit growing.
Well, let me ask you,
and
I'm getting back to bud break in March. You said in your report on your website that, this is unusual to have that warmth come in and you get that bud break that early. But then you kind of said also in that same statement, but it seems to be becoming a trend since 2017. You've seen this happen more and more. And so,
yep.
What does that mean going forward? What are winemakers? Is there something they can do, or is this just, what are they going to have to do to kind of deal with this?
Well, I mean, there's two things. Well, I guess three things. Number one, you can hope for a normal weather pattern. Some of the properties are just small, family, farms, family producers that don't have a lot of, disposable capital, let's say. So they're, subject to the whims of Mother Nature. The other two things that you can do is, we've seen it a lot in France, not so much in Italy, but the couple of years when Champagne and Bordeaux had really bad frost, threats of frost, I guess, they have what they call pot fires or bucket fires. So it literally looks like a bunch of 5-gallon buckets. I mean, thousands of them that they put on the ground in between the vine rows, and they light a fire.
Heaters.
And
These are heaters.
No, it's like an open fire, not a heater. It's
really?
A wood burning fire. Yeah, because that's the rub. People complain about the smoke pollution. But yeah, I mean, they literally light fires and to try to keep the vineyard warmer, to keep the frost away. Another thing they do is they have these big, it's really just a big fan on a metal pole. It kind of looks like a strange windmill of sorts, but that just blows air across the vineyard as well to try to keep, the air circulating and keep it a little bit warmer. But you need the electricity infrastructure for that. The fan, the motors and the fans are expensive again, so it's difficult to deal with.
Well, and then in addition to that, say they get all those solutions in place, that deals with frost. But the other thing that seems to be hitting that region is the potential of hail.
Yeah, well, that's what I was getting at before. After they got through May, which the Italians have a word for it. It's called peronospora. And we were referring to it when we were over there in October as the P word, because every single producer we went to or talked to, you just bring that word up and they nod their head yes, peronospora. So it's like a downy mildew, and it just from too much water, because the plants could never dry off, basically. And it attacks the grapes and they just rot, and we talked to, I think one of your favorite producers in Brunello was Tenuta Fanti.
Yes.
So we were there and I was talking to Elisa Fanti and I said, did you have peronospora? And she just started nodding her head. And she's like, we would go out in the morning, we would spray copper sulfate. It's an organic compound, right? Copper is found in the soil. And what that does is it shields the vines. Basically, it's kind of like when you wax your car and then the water beads up. But she said, we would put it on in the morning, and by the afternoon, it would be just washed off before it would have any impact, and we'd have to go out and do it again. So that's how expensive a treatment can be for that. But beyond May into the summer, July and late June, July, August, there was several instances of hail. Now, hail is very, confined to a small area wherever you happen to have a thunderstorm. But this was coming up, once a week and in different places. And, Chiara Boschis in Piemonte, she sent me pictures of one of her vineyards. She said, this is a Dolcetto vineyard. She goes, people ask me all the time, why are wines so expensive? Well, I'm going to show you. She goes, she had a picture of hail in her hand. It was about the size of an egg of the ice or frost, whatever the correct word for it is. And she said, I worked 10 months, in this vineyard, making it perfect. And all that work was completely destroyed in 15 minutes. Wow. So no grapes from that vineyard that year. There was hail in San Gimignano. There was hail in Castellina. There was hail in parts of Montalcino, over Fonti, over Biondi Santi, over Talenti, Colimitoni, right over the section of that hill, Poggio Antico. They all had hail. And this was on top of, the Peronospora damage, which could have been 30%. The frost damage, if you had it, 15 to 25%. And oh, by the way, the deer and the wild boar, which, always are munching, to the tune of maybe 5 or 10%. So there are a lot of small producers. I know, Daniele Rosti from Campo Chiarenti. Yep. He had no harvest this year, nothing.
Wow.
He said he picked a small parcel of Vernaccia grapes that he thinks maybe they'll do something with. But I gathered the way he described it to me was it's not going to be good enough to be in the discipline of, Vernaccia San Gimignano. So I think what he's saying is, maybe I'll make some sort of, proprietary white, Reserva out of it. But he says it's small. It's only, a couple hundred liters. Wow. But no red grapes, nothing. And also no olives. That was another issue too. But the olives, the wet conditions encouraged it's simply called the olive fly. So the olive fly literally drills and burrows into an olive and eats it from the inside out. So there's almost no olives. The olive crop was really bad this year as well. So what were they saying to me, the producers? They definitely realized that, a lot of times when you ask a producer, oh, is it a bad vintage? They're saying, oh, well, there's really no bad vintages. Some vintages we make less wine, but, there's always a little bit. This time they were just kind of, the look on their face, they were just kind of gassed. They would just nod their head and like, yeah, it was extremely challenging. They just that language just blurted it right out. There was no trying to hide it. So I think what they did say is what they were able to pick is very good quality, but the quantity is anywhere from 50 to 80% less than normal.
Really?
So, yeah, I can't imagine they can really have the wherewithal to raise prices. The prices always creep up a little bit, but I just don't think you'll see much wine from 23.
When you think
especially
about
at the higher end,
years like this, how far back would you have to go to think about another year that, kind of 50 to 80% is quite a bit to lose? Has this been something that's happened, the last 10 years, or is this just a really bad year?
Yeah. No, I think down in Brunello and in most of Tuscany, even in Umbria and Piemonte, 2014 was very challenging. Not this bad. Most of the producers I remember talking to at the Benvenuto Brunello for the 2014s when they came out told me they were down about 40 to 45%. And that was not so much challenging with the frost and they had a lot of rain, which was mostly the issue, but it wasn't every day, in 1 month. Most of the rain they got was confined to May and then it stopped.
Yeah.
Except for the thunderstorms in the summertime. So June was pretty dry. In 2014, it kind of just rained almost consistently through the length of the growing season. But before that, 2002 is probably the worst that I can remember. And before that, 92.
Okay.
in terms of, lots of rain and reduced quality and quantity.
Okay, so stock up on 2021s, 22s for sure.
Yeah, well, that's the good part, is there are a lot of good vintages coming down the pike. I mean, next month, 2019 Brunellos can be released. I don't know how fast they'll make it over here. They usually don't show up in mass until April, May, but
well, let's jump into that topic, because you're right. That's coming
sure.
out next, the turn of the calendar. And you always get an opportunity to, and probably on your trip, get to sample a lot of these that will be released. And what are your thoughts on the 19s that are coming out?
Yeah, they're really great. I mean, we had, we had maybe, I want to say maybe a half a dozen 2019s we were able to taste on the trip. Some mostly were just poured out of unlabeled bottles. We had one of Tenuta Fanti's wines with lunch. We tasted Talenti's 19s. We tasted some of Bonfi's 19s, and they're really, really great. I mean, just beautiful, beautiful fruit. Lots of complexity already early in both, the flavors and the aromas. And then that was kind of backed up by my tasting. So I went to Benvenuto Brunello at the end of November here in Manhattan, and I think I tasted about 50 2019s. So I'm still putting that report together. I'm having some technical difficulties with the service provider that helped with the event, but I have my notes for that. And usually when I go to Benvenuto Brunello, it's my notes start looking like, bright cherry, spice, toasted wood or sandalwood. It's like they're all in a very similar flavor profile, but these wines were very different, and they were showing a lot more complexity than that. And wine versus wine were showing different characteristics. They weren't all very similar. Some of them were built very masculine, that you needed to age them. Some of them were so delicious, and I mean super silky, that it almost was if they had no tannins. But the fruit was just so beautiful, you could drink them right now. So I think it's going to be, a really great vintage that's going to drink well early. It might not be the longest aging vintage across the board in general. I think you're going to have to pick and choose which wines you might want to hold. But it really it didn't have a downside for me. I didn't taste any wines, at Benvenuto Brunello and say, wow, this, missed the mark or something went wrong here. It just didn't happen. And, going back to the wines that, have already been released, you can find, 2019 Chianti Classico Reservas and, some of the Super Tuscans or the IGT wines that have already come out from 2019. They're also beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's definitely going to be a keeper vintage.
Okay, I like that about the 2019 vintage, because it's nice to have some Brunello that, we already know, the way you described that, some of them almost like no tannins that we can start enjoying and drinking now. It's always fun to put Brunellos away for a few years and see how they might change a little bit in the bottle. But I always enjoy being able to, have some, because, I'm not the most patient person, John. I get some good bottles of wine. I want to enjoy them as soon as possible.
No, I agree with that too. And I mean, I don't, I don't consider myself to be that old, but I am getting to the age where it's like, I don't need to sit wines away for 15 years anymore.
Exactly.
So, perfect example, and I'll give all your listeners a heads up. So at lunch at Tenuta Fanti, she was fortunate enough to pour us the 2019 Brunello Volocchio. That's a crew that they produce. It's not a single vineyard. It's from 3 or 4 different parcels that they make a special selection for. It was outstanding. So at the estate in October, I told her I want to buy a 6-pack, which I almost never do. And so I bought it and paid for it. And she can't even send it to me till January. But it's already bought and paid for. And then I went and tasted it again at Benvenuto Brunello. And I said, yep, this is a wow wine. I'm like, I made the right choice.
Yeah, you made a good purchase.
Getting it. Yep. It just reaffirmed my earlier tasting. So it's a beautiful, beautiful wine. And what's great about it is it's not, it's not ridiculously expensive. I think maybe it'll be $60.
Oh man, that's great.
So yeah, I mean, for it's a significant step up over their estate Brunello, which was also very nice. But the estate Brunello sells, I think, for $38 or $40 in the U.S. here.
Before we leave the topic of Brunello, I do want to ask you this question. I don't know where you stand. You and I don't think we've ever had the conversation on, the end of year wine list, the top 100 of 2023. I look at them. I'm not a huge, go out and hunt these down. But I do want to make mention that this year on Wine Spectator's list, the Brunello was the 2018 Brunello was the number one wine. And you being that guy, we got to ask you, what do you think about that wine? What did you think about that being Spectator's number one wine?
I don't really pay a lot of attention to that Spectator list anymore. Yeah. It's funny. I was tasting at Benvenuto Brunello. I was sitting right next to Bruce Sanderson, the Wine Spectator's Italian editor. And I was this close to asking him, what was up with that? Because I tasted that wine. We were on a trip in South Carolina back in early September, and they had it on the list at a reasonable price. I said, great, I like Argiano, I'll try it. And I had a bunch of 18s. I've written up two parts of my coverage on 18 with a third part to come, and Argiano was in there. And you know what? It was an okay wine to me. I mean, it was not better. It wasn't the best 2018 that I've had. It wasn't probably even in top 2018 or top 10 2018s that I've had. It was nice. It was nothing more than nice. So, I was really surprised to see it in there. It was number one, especially when the 2019s are going to be coming out next year. Are they going to have a Brunello make number one again?
Yeah.
That would be pretty odd, I would think. But I don't usually play, all the conspiracy theories and tinfoil hats. But I mean, the folks that bought Argiano have put, hundreds of millions of dollars into that estate. And it's distributed in the U.S. now by Gallo, who, spends millions of dollars of advertising with the Wine Spectator. So who knows?
Okay. So we can kind of get what you're saying, and I agree with you, John.
Yeah.
But you know
what? I was having said all that,
yeah.
we had about, we had probably a couple cases of the 18 Argiano lying in the shop where I consult on the weekends. It was sitting on the shelf, I don't know what we had it for, probably $60-$65, something like that. And, all other 18s were flying out around it. And, I think the Wine Spectator list came out on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, whatever day of the week it was. By the time I got back to the following weekend, Argiano was long gone.
Yeah.
Long gone.
Yeah.
And people have been calling up, do you have it? Do you have it? No, we don't have it.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't think we're going to get it again. It's probably in between vintages. So,
I did a recent release of an episode where I talked about, the wine list and, kind of that it doesn't mean a whole lot to me. And quite frankly, I just don't understand it. But anyway, but I wanted to ask you about that one just because I didn't know if you'd had it and if you thought it was just really good. But it's nice wine. That's the conclusion. It's a nice wine, but a little surprising to you that it would be number one in the top 100.
Yeah. And the only thing that actually really bothers me is, these guys, go after this stuff sometimes. They're collectors. If they set that wine down for 10 years, they're going to be really disappointed.
Oh.
I mean, 18 is a vintage to drink. It's not a vintage to age. I mean, we had 18s almost exclusively on the last tour in October at every producer that we stopped at, every restaurant that we were in, and they're really enjoyable wines. They're just not, they're not made for aging. So, I'm looking at my Argiano review right now is in part one of my coverage on part two on my coverage of 18. I won't read the note, but I had it at 89 points.
Wow.
The last sentence in my review is, "This is pretty bland and I can't get too excited."
Yeah.
So, hey, it's different strokes for different folks, but what I would say is go to my website, look at the coverages on 18, and do yourself a favor and buy a different wine. Because the Argiano, it won't be, well, now especially, but even in general, it won't be the cheapest Brunello that you'll find.
Yeah, and to that point, it's also maybe going up in price because of that demand. Anybody who does have it on a shelf may be bumping the numbers a little bit.
That's always, there's definitely retailers that do that. I mean, I don't want to get too off topic,
Yeah.
but the other day I got an email from a retailer who was I was shocked, frankly. It was an email. They were trying to sell Blanton's, and we sell Blanton's at the store. We don't mark it up. When we get it in, it goes out, I think, for $90.
Yeah.
This guy, they had it. It was like 100. There were 3 of them. I don't remember which one it was. I should have sent it to you. One was 149, and it was 179, and then 210 or something. Like, I guess the 210 was like with that gold label or whatever it is.
Blanton's
I don't know.
gold.
I've never seen anything. Yeah. I've never seen anything like it. We only get the regular one.
It would have to be depending on which ones they were, but that could be an okay price, John. The numbers you threw out and what you're describing, that could be a fair price for those Blanton products.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
It could be. It's just, but just to say, you're right. I mean, there's going to be retailers that are going to have that wine, and now they'll move it into a temperature controlled case instead of sitting it on the shelf, and they'll sell it for $100.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I had a guy come in the store yesterday, and he had the Wine Spectator Top 100 list printed out, and he was going down the list asking me if we had anything, because they were doing a special like event, like dinner event based on that list. But I mean, I don't know how that list works, because a lot of the vintages he was looking for, we have the vintage, before. If he wanted 2021, we have 2020.
Yeah.
And 2019, he was looking for, we had 2018. And I'm like, because the Wine Spectator gets those wines, in advance when they make that list. So they're not even all in the market yet.
Sure.
And some of them are long gone. So who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
let's jump to Chianti. And you had mentioned there might be something new, or there is something new going on over there.
Yeah, well, it's new, I guess, but it's not. Let me just pull up something so I don't give any wrong information. But a couple of years back, the Consorzio went ahead and changed the laws for the Gran Selezione. So they created what they call UGAs. A UGA is it's a three long Italian word. It's very difficult to pronounce, but it's basically divided the Chianti Classico zone further down into 11 separate geographic areas. And they changed the law for the Gran Selezione. So now when you see a Gran Selezione, it has to be at least 90% Sangiovese. Before, it could have been 80. Now it has to be 90. And before, you could have put that other 20%, you could have used almost any grape that you want. Now that remaining 10% has to be indigenous varietals. So no more international varietals are allowed. So it went from 80-20 to 90-10. And what's big about that, and it's important to remember, this only applies to Gran Selezione. But now what you're going to be able to see, and they're just starting to trickle into the market, which is why I say it's new. You are allowed to put the comune, or the town, on the label from where your grapes are grown. So I just saw it on Fontodi was one example. They're in Panzano. So now their Gran Selezione has the word Panzano on it, real big. So that is the first vintage, and I believe it was 2020 Gran Selezione. So starting with that vintage, because they phased it in after they changed the law. The law was changed, I guess, back in 2021 or 2022. So they waited to sort of phase it in to give everybody a chance to kind of get their ducks in a row. Because a lot of these producers, were throwing, Cabernet, Merlot, Syrah. You could throw anything you want in there. So now if they're going to make a Gran Selezione, they got to do something else with that fruit. So this was a chance to give them time to figure that out. But so now you have, you'll be seeing that even more specific label come out.
So my first question is, and correct me, make sure I got this right. It has to be at least 90%, not just 90%. So that means, could we see more 100% Sangioveses from
you? Yeah, you are.
Yeah,
you are.
That's what I think.
But you already were. I mean, in a lot of ways, you already were. The Gran Seleziones, people went straight to making it 100% Sangiovese. They didn't have to.
Yeah.
I think what Chianti really wants to do, at least with their Gran Selezione, and no one has told me this, but I think they're just trying to raise the stature to the point where it's kind of at the level of Brunello. Because Brunello is 100% Sangiovese. Different clone, but still Sangiovese. I think they want to be seen in that same light because Brunello has a lot of prestige that, Chianti Classico doesn't always have. But the irony of it is, some of these wines, while you can find a great Gran Selezione for, say, $40, a lot of them are $75, $100.
Yeah.
And it's like, at that price, there are a lot of Brunellos that are less money.
Right.
So I'm like, I don't know what you guys are trying to do. You're trying to get people to, the Gran Selezione production from Chianti Classico is only about 6 or 7% of their total production. So there's not a lot of it to go around. So that's what their focus is, to elevate just that little tippy top of the pyramid, if you will. So we'll see where it goes. I mean, they're already talking about, producers want to be able to put, Panzano or Castellina on a Chianti Classico and not just, or on a Reserva. They're saying, well, if the grapes are grown in that area, why shouldn't we be able to tell people? So right now you can't do that. But they are already talking about it. So who knows? But that is definitely one change that you'll see coming from Chianti Classico. And as those wines start to come out, you'll see that, again, the producer doesn't have to do it, but I don't know why they wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, and did you make sure I understood you clearly? Did you say they're also expanding down into Chianti, what will now be a larger area of Chianti Classico?
No. They divided what existed into smaller territories.
Okay.
So, for example, this is kind of a weird one. So, Greve is one of the traditional communes that you could produce Chianti Classico in. And within Greve is a small area called Lamole. So we take the tour group up to one vineyard in Lamole. And it's actually, the producer is called Lamole di Lamole, Lamole of Lamole, because originally the producer was the only one there. So they were just Lamole. And then when a couple of other producers came in, because I think there's about 8 or 9 of them now, they became Lamole of Lamole. So those producers sitting in Lamole, like a subzone of Greve, also Montefiorale, which was a subzone of Greve, I think they have to make a decision. They can either label their wines Greve, or they can label them Lamole or Montefiorale. So they have to make that choice, and once they make it, it's binding. So it's a little bit of a strange situation in that sense. But Montefiorale and Lamole and Vagliali were, that's another hard word to say. It's a little town, Vagliali. Those were 3 of the UGAs that were carved out of existing, geographical areas.
Okay.
So
good. That makes me feel better. But yeah, understanding it might be difficult. But I'm glad that the region that is Chianti Classico hasn't expanded.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what about? Let's jump to another region in Tuscany and see what's going on. The wine of the nobles. Anything going on over there?
Yeah, I'll tell you what's going on. The wines are getting much, much better.
Are they?
And I can't. Maybe it's just the vintages that we happen to hit. We had amazing Vino Nobile on the tour. We spent two and a half days in Montepulciano. We visited a few wineries. We had dinner there and we had lunch there.
Now, quick question for you, John. This in this area, same clone as in Chianti, as far as Sangiovese?
No,
different clone.
No, nothing is simple in Italy.
Just so that the listeners understand, this is a still Sangiovese, but a different clone.
Correct. So it's a clone of Sangiovese called Brunello Gentile.
Okay.
And yeah, that's the clone that they use in Montepulciano. A lot of people, for whatever reason, and I don't really know why, to be honest, they always compare Vino Nobile to Brunello. It's, Montepulciano versus Montalcino. They're both hill towns. They're kind of, parallel with one another, but they've never really been similar. And the reason I say that is, even from the start, Vino Nobile only needs to be 70% Brunello Gentile. So where Brunello was always 100% Sangiovese by law. So a lot of the Vino Nobile, there's 30% there, and they can be, almost everything else. Just like in Chianti, they can use, Cabernet, Merlot, Colorino, Canaiolo, whatever they want. Although, again, a lot of producers are getting serious with, exalting Sangiovese. So a lot of them are 100% now. Poliziano is a good example of how they do it a little bit differently. So they have their base Vino Nobile, if you will, which I think is about 85% Sangiovese, and then they put a little Cabernet and Merlot in it for the rest. But their higher end wines are 100% Sangiovese. So it's a little bit different. But as I say, over the course of a lunch and a dinner, we probably had, 6 or 7 different labels of the wines, plus, the 2 wineries that we went to, Boscarelli and Contucci. And the wines, across we probably had 17s, 18s, probably 17, 18, 19, and 20, depending where we were. And the wines were just, beautiful Sangioveses, fresh, floral, really nice concentration, but yet easily approachable and ready to drink. I don't ever expect Vino Nobile to be the hefty, brawny wine that Brunello is. I don't see them being vinified that way by a lot of producers, but they're just they're such gorgeous wines. And, I can't really think of one that's readily available around here that's more than $40, and I spoke about Poliziano, but a Vignese, another great producer, they're, organic, biodynamic. They really take care of their vineyards. 100% Sangiovese, it's $24 for their wine. So there's some really, really exciting wines to.
So what do you attribute this to? Is this current producers that have been in the area for a long time that are just, to your point, you kind of made the comment earlier, they're taking it more seriously, or is it?
I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
They're focusing on being, organic and biodynamic. A Vignese is certified. Solchetto makes beautiful wines. They're now certified organic, biodynamic. Boscarelli is organic, even though I don't believe that they're certified because of the way their vineyards happen to sit. But they're just, they're doing things better. They're learning more. They're improving their vineyard practices. But it's funny. Like we go to Contucci, who they've been in the main piazza. They have their palace where the family lives. A couple generations of family live right in the piazza in Montepulciano. The wine cellars are under the palace. It's a crazy thing to see. It's again a benefit of my tour because most people don't go down there, but they're making wine down there the way it was made, 1,000 years ago. And it's such a tight, cramped space. I was asking Andrea Contucci when he was with him, I'm like, how do you guys, get your new barrel? How do you get stuff down here? And he's like, well, we have ways, it's clearly, not a real big, service elevator that they can use. But, even that, they're keeping the barrels clean. I mean, not that they were not keeping them clean in the past, but it's just um, they rub the outside of the barrels with beeswax to keep it from getting mold on the wood. They're just doing a lot of things, using better corks. The DM corks are there.
So you're saying it's in the details now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Are there any new producers to the area that have been there for a few years now that are starting to do some things that you're impressed with?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any new. Again, it's really a function of the space.
Okay.
It's hard to break out. I mean, they're even smaller by acreage. I believe they're smaller than Brunello, who always seems to crop up a new producer somewhere. But what I do see is, and I don't know what to attribute this to, but I do see more labels coming here in the U.S. So I think producers are seeing traction and able to get their wines, exported here. For years, I saw nothing but Poliziano, Avignonese, maybe Day, Fattoria del Cero, and that was pretty much it. But now you can find. We had a great wine at lunch. The estate's called Monte Mercurio. I mean, the wines are fabulous. And, I had never heard of them until I did a couple of years ago. I did a multi-part report on Vino Nobile, and I was working with the Consorzio, and they were helping me get the samples, and they got this guy to submit. And their wines are spectacular. And when I saw them on the list at the place in lunch, I'm like, we have to have this. It's just unbelievable. And you can find their wines here in the U.S. now. So, I mean, they're not new. They don't go back, 600 years like Contucci or some of the, royal families of Tuscany and Chianti. But I mean, they've been making wine for 40 or 50 years.
That's great.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. And it's still, again, the value is there.
Yeah. And that's good for us to know that there's more of those wines from that area from Vino Nobile coming into the States, because it is a wine that I thoroughly enjoy for sure.
Yeah. And, it's like the feeling is kind of validated for me, when we take the tour groups there, and they buy a bunch of wine, so this year we went to, as I said, Contucci and Boscarelli, and I think every guest bought wine.
Yeah.
So, some of the bottles don't come here, some of them are not exported. The production is smaller, but, they were willing, like the wine enough to be willing to deal with the shipping costs and things like that to get it back.
Well, and I want to say what's also fun about your tour is you're mentioning some of these great wines that, are here in the States. But in addition to that, when you're on your tour, you can get wines from these producers that are fantastic that don't get distributed to the States. Yeah. And you also go to some places that just aren't distributed at all to the States. And this is your opportunity to buy some great wine.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's two great. Well, Campo Chiarenti is one of them, which, he doesn't really have any importation here. There's another family winery just like him, they're actually in the Montecucco DOCG, within sight of Castello Bonfi. I mean, that's how close they are to Brunello. It is just a small creek that separates their property from the Brunello zone. They make beautiful wines. We stop there every year for a tour tasting, and we have lunch. And everybody buys their wines. They grow their own saffron. Everybody buys the saffron. It's just a beautiful, beautiful afternoon. But those wines, again, their most expensive wine, I think, is €26, and it's a Sangiovese Reserva that's absolutely outstanding. And people were buying by the case and buying they were also buying the saffron. The place is called Poggio Stenti, Stenti. And I mean, she'll just like Daniele, she's shipped straight to your door from the vineyard.
That's awesome.
And the people, again, the people that have been on the tour have reordered, a couple times over. So it's a memento because, like you said, it's special. You're not going to see it here. And when you meet the people and you see, how passionate and how nice they are, you also want to, support them. So that has something to do with it too. The Argianos and the Antinoris of the world, they make great wine, but no one's going to worry about them,
Yeah.
making a living.
Right.
So,
All right. Well, let's jump to another area that makes some great wines, but I think they're getting they've been pricey, but I'm just trying to understand the way the rates are going up. And is there anything that we can still drink? And I'm talking about Super Tuscans.
Super Tuscans, yeah.
Well, how do you say that region?
Bulgari?
Is that the right way?
Bulgari.
Okay.
Yeah, that one.
You have some thoughts on this area? I've seen a recent post from you. I say recent, it's probably been a few weeks. The Tiganillo, I know you love the wine, but you talked about how the price just continues to climb.
Yeah, well, going back to what we were talking about before. So the 2019 Tignanello, when it came out, locally here in the U.S., I guess it was about 100. If you were lucky, it was maybe $125. For a special wine, not the end of the world. The 2020 made Wine Spectator's Top 100, which was last year's list, not the list that just came out. So when the 2020 released, it's $175. And it was funny because we had it in the store. I think we were selling it maybe for $170. And I went into the back with this huge temperature controlled room, and I was looking for something. And there was a six pack of Tignanello there with the receipt stapled to it. The guy bought it and hadn't come picked it up yet. And I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like, $1,100. I'm like, that can't be right. And then when I figured it out, I'm like, oh my God, with the 6 bottles at $170, plus tax,
Yeah.
it was over $1,000. I'm like, $1,000 for a Tignanello 6-pack? That's crazy. So it doesn't ever seem to end. But we'll sell it. Believe me, we'll sell it.
Yeah.
But that's partially due to the Wine Spectator list again. But in terms of Super Tuscans, the big ones that are always out there, they're not bargains, that's for sure.
And to your point, they're always going to sell. There's people lining
They're always
up.
going to sell because they're super popular, and they're just not. Listen, they're excellent wines. Don't get me wrong; they're some of the best wines Italy produces, but they're not produced in large quantity.
Yeah,
and it's produced for the world. So there's plenty of people looking for them.
Are there things to drink in that area for us average wine drinkers that want to spend $20 to $40 a bottle? Are there things that you like from that region, or is it just kind of a hit or miss?
Yeah, I think you have to, and that is a region, especially Bulgari, where there are newer producers coming in, or it's people that are. A lot of times these estates, will give somebody a piece of property, or maybe they were growing Merlot for, let's say, Ornellaia or something, and now they've decided, okay, we're going to make our own wine. So this estate, the land has always been there, but now you have a new wine label popping up overnight. There are a lot of nice wineries down there, and we worked with a woman on the tour this year. She actually came to the Agriturismo where we had the guests, and one of the things she does, she has her own business, and she runs around sourcing wines that typically are not exported to the U.S., and she tries to get them and ship them door to door to give people a more unique experience. And she's based in Tuscany, but she has a lot of clients down in Bulgari because they're cropping up. Like I said, there's a winery called Chiappini, which is right down in there, right in the same area as Sassicaia, as Ornellaia, that they make really nice wines, but again, the Bulgari makeup, right? The DOC of Bulgari is Cabernet Franc, Merlot. That's what you're typically finding there. The weather is very similar to Bordeaux. There's a river that runs through there where you have kind of like um, they call it the Bassa and Alta instead of the left and right bank. So what that means is you have the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, or the Turanian Sea to be correct. And then you have a strip of land, which is the coastal part of Bulgaria. And then you have a little river. And then from on the other side of the river, the land goes up to like mountains. So the Alta, which means high, there's vineyards on the Alta side that are typically more sought after. The ones on the Bassa side, on the other side of the river, are typically, kind of looked down upon by the people on the Alta side of the river. But they're both making Cabernet Merlot, Cabernet Franc, like the Bordelais do. So there's Bulgari Rosso and there's Bulgari Superiore, which is, your top end wines.
Yeah.
The Bulgari Rosso wines can be fairly nice. Le Macchioli makes a white label, and it's just Le Macchioli Bulgari Rosso. That's all it says. And I think it's, Cabernet, Sangiovese, Merlot, Syrah, whatever, because the blending laws are different at the lower price point. And that can be a really nice, like, house red. But it's, it's 20, 25 bucks, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So it's not super expensive, but it's a little bit pricier. But those are the wines, you just got to kind of find them out, and my partner and I are probably going to do something with this woman. Her name is Claudia Caligari, and we're probably going to have an event with her for my readers and for my partners. Because like I say, she came and she brought several different wines to the group. And some of them bought wines. They were impressed and bought what she had to offer. So we're probably going to do that again next year because the guests enjoyed it. And these are wines, again, that you're not going to find ever here on a shelf.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up this episode with, you're talking about the tour again. Let's jump back into that real quick. Let's get some more detail to the listeners and give them some idea of how you're doing this going forward. Because even I don't know. I'm wondering how you're doing this because, as you already stated, 2024 is already sold out and sold out fairly quick. And people are going to go, okay, is he going to, add tours, or is he going to start 2025 sooner than he did 2024? I mean, how do I get in on this if I'm interested?
I mean, this is what I would say. If you're seriously interested in wanting to come in 2025, you can tell me that. And I don't know how people would be already committing to that, travel that far off, but you never know. If that's the case, then, especially if I happen to know the person, I would definitely reserve a spot for them. Because that's what happened this year. This year was a little bit different. I actually have, and this speaks volumes to the quality of the trip. 4 of the people that are coming came 2 years ago, and they're coming again.
Wow!
So they're re-upping, and they want to do it again. Now the itinerary is a little different, but they're going to get probably 50 to 60% of what they're going to get is going to be a repeat. But they're eager to come again. They can't wait to go. So I had 4 people, before I even started trying to sell it. But then I had people, who missed out on last year that were kind of on a waiting list, and I don't give anybody a priority or anything like that. But when I start advertising it, on promoting it on Facebook, on Twitter, also on Instagram, and I always, the page about the tour is always up on my website. I think I started selling, what's December? I guess I started promoting it in November, and like I said, it went in a couple of days. So I filled eight spots in like 3 days.
Yeah.
So again, it's a unique, highly exclusive and personally guided tour. Like I said, 12 people, but, we do have singles that come. Last year we had 3 or 4 singles, I guess, and only, a few couples. But so what I'll probably do is this year's tour we had to go in 2024 is going to be in September. Normally it's in October. It'll probably be in October in 2025 unless something comes up.
That was a question I
Um,
had for you. I didn't know if you were shifting. I saw you made that change, and I was wondering if that was permanent or if that was just for 2024.
Well, I mean, I think it's just for 2024 only because the weather is it's a little less hot in
Yeah.
October than it is in September. But my partner and I had some personal conflicts. We both had a couple of weddings, and he was running another trip that kind of rolled into where we normally want to be. So we had to move this one up.
Got you.
Um, but yeah, I would like to go back to October. So, and yeah, to answer your question, we do plan to add more trips, but it's this is at the moment not my full time job, although it's his full time job. So for me, I'm only doing one a year right now until I make this my full time job, and then we'll do at least two, if not three.
Maybe at some point in the near future, John and his wife will just live in Italy and we'll just hook up with you over there.
Well, that's nice too. You never know. You never know. My partner bought a little house in Umbria.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me have you discuss this. We're obviously talking about this is a wine featuring kind of trip. That's what it's about. But you talked about it's very well guided by you and your business partner, which no doubt about it. People can hear you talk about Italian wine and they know, they're in for a treat with what you're going to share with them. But not only, do they get you and your business partner, but they also get access to these places that you're talking about. A lot of people might be able to go there and have a tasting, but you're going to, not always, but a lot of times put together tastings at some places where the actual owner of the establishment, the vineyard, or the winemaker may be joining you and talking about the wines that you guys get to taste through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they definitely do. I mean, a perfect example is, we were at Castello Bonfi and it was busy. They were doing a lot of tours the day that we were there, and we were with our tour group, and we were kind of in an elevated position, and we could look down, and there were kind of like other tour groups, following us, sort of, and they were just, with some, I'm sure the hospitality person, they know what they're talking about, but they were just with a regular hospitality person, with their little Bonfi shirt on and giving them a tour. We were with the owner of Castello Bonfi. We were with John Mariani. He's 92 years old, and he was regaling the guests like crazy. They were eating it up. So we have the owner, and he's giving us this history that nobody knows, and he's giving these anecdotal stories that some of them are true, some of them are not, but the guests are just like starry-eyed looking at him, and he takes us on part of a tour where the other tour groups don't go. We went into the back of the winery where the packaging happens. We saw the bottling machine. They don't all go through there. They go maybe a little bit through the castle and the Enoteca. You taste a couple of wines. We had a private tasting upstairs in the castle. We had a private lunch with John up in the castle. We were there for 6 hours. And everybody said, it was the highlight of the trip, because, and it was the same way last year when we went there with him. Last year, he happened to be there, by accident, so to speak. This year, he planned to meet us. So yeah, you get the extra wines. Maybe if you're going to do a regular tasting, you're going to get the Rosso di Montalcino and the early, the current Brunello. We're getting Sumis. We're getting, the cru Brunellos. We're getting, we'll pull an older Brunello out of the cellar, to show you how it evolves. We get the barrel taste out of the, the current vintages with these people. So it's definitely not something that you can just, arrange for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to mention you're a foodie. Like I'm a food guy. We love to cook and enjoy food. This trip also exposes you to some great cuisine in Italy as well.
Oh God, yes. Yeah. I mean, we try to eat, that's the other thing. We originally conceived of this, we called it Rustic Tuscany because we're going to be out in the Tuscan countryside. We're going to live like locals. And our goal kind of was, absent when you run into people doing tours at wineries, obviously, but our goal was to kind of not see, other Americans. Anybody can go, in Florence, they can go to whatever the famous restaurants are, but we're trying to find, Even in Montalcino, for example, everybody knows Montalcino. They go wine tasting, they go have dinner somewhere in Montalcino. We don't even eat in Montalcino. We eat in the little town next door. Mom and pop places where the menus are scribbled or whatever it may be that's fresh that day. And we always have a pizza night and things like that. But yeah, when we're at the Agriturismo for the first half of the trip, we take over the entire place. The guy's got, 10 apartments or whatever he has. And he has a room where he feeds us breakfast and dinner if we're there for dinner. And he's got this big, long wooden communal table. And we all sit down like a family. He hires a local woman and she comes in and cooks for us like we're her family. So it could be anything, but it's just family style local food. And, maybe it doesn't sound like super flashy, but it always is like one of the best things that the guests talk about, because when we're out, we usually have a bigger meal in the Italian style. It's usually a midday meal. We typically see a winery in the morning, then we go somewhere for lunch, or we have lunch at a winery, and then maybe a winery in the afternoon, or we visit a hill town. So the dinner at home is usually more relaxed. It's more, jovial. It's a little bit lighter because we've had a big meal and people can linger and talk and enjoy themselves. But even having said that, we have realized that, it's a lot of food and a lot of wine, so we pared back this year, this past October, we pared back the pace a little bit and it still wasn't quite enough. So in 2024, we pared back the pace again. So this past year, we visited an olive oil frontoio. We got to see them crushing and pressing olives. We got to do an olive oil tasting. So that was completely different. Everybody loved that. We've kept it on the itinerary. This coming year, we're adding Tuscan cooking classes in one of the agriturismos that we're staying with outside of Montepulciano. So that's going to be another day because we realize, my partner and I, sometimes we've defined what we call this, the accomplice, the spousal accomplice. That's what we call it. There's usually, usually the husband, for whatever reason, but one of them is usually super into wine, and the other one is just kind of coming along for the trip, right? They like wine, but they're not geeky about wine. So we call that the spousal accomplice. And what we're trying to do is give that person a little more, juice, a little more bang for the buck. So they're getting the, trip to the market the one day. They're getting the olive oil frontoio. They're getting the cooking class. They're getting the winery. We're doing a little more winery lunches because that's definitely, most people don't eat at the wineries. So we had, I think, I want to say 5 or 6 lunches at wineries this year.
Wow.
And yeah, it's great because then you can really see, how the foods marry, with the wine, how to pair them. And it gives you an idea about, okay, if I buy this wine, this is what I can take it home. This is what I can do, remembers your trip and things like that. So I think we've got a lot of improvements, I think, for, believe it or not, for 2024. And the one thing we kept, is that we do a guided walking tour. We hire an expert guide. We do a 2-hour walking tour of Siena, which is fabulous.
Well, that'll work off some of that food.
It sure will. It sure does. And it's great. The guide we use is great and really knowledgeable, and she connects very well with the people. But that's what we're trying to do, trying to move around a little bit more. We slowed the pace a little bit. So instead of going to, for example, instead of trying to fit a visit to Daniele in, because his winery is a little far flung at Campo Chiarenti, we invited him to come to lunch with us because we go to lunch at this private family villa. Again, it's a friend of a friend of a friend. I asked my partner, I'm like, how did you find this place? He's like, I know a guy. So it's like, so we have lunch in this family house where, the grandfather is cooking us all the food in this wood burning stove and vegetables outside. And Daniele came and joined us and brought all his wines. We had his wines with lunch. And then he talked about the wines. He sold the wines. He sold his oil. And it was great. because the family villa where we go, they don't provide any wine. They just cook us the food.
It's a perfect pair.
So we always have to bring wine there, and I'm like, well, let's bring Danielle.
Yeah.
So it worked out really well. So yeah, those things are, like I said, they're unique, they're interesting, and if you have, a guest who's enthusiastic and just willing to listen, it doesn't matter that they're not, a wine geek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's finish up. Let people know where they need to go find you again at your website.
That's right. I don't think we did that
No.
actually. So it's just very simple. First name and last name, www.johnfodera.com, Fodera. Or you can easily Google Tuscan Vines, website, and the Google will be the first or second hit for sure. I'm not even sure which one anymore. So.
And if they just search Tuscan Vines on any of the social media, it should pull you up, correct?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram.
Yeah. Now,
that's it.
On the website, you put out what's the goal there? How often are you putting out content for us to read?
Well, the goal is it's a little harder to do than it was because I'm trying to do more informative articles that take a little longer to create. So I usually do a minimum of one a week. So I would say anywhere between four to six per month is typically my goal. And that's not so bad. And then plus, if you hit the website and you're new for the first time, it'll prompt you to sign up for my newsletter. The newsletter is free. There's no spam. It comes out quarterly, so I usually only 4 a year. If there's a special announcement, sometimes I put that out. If for no other reason, the newsletter is one of the ways that I promote the trip.
Yeah.
So if you're interested, you would get that straight to your inbox, and you usually would find that out early. That's what I give the advantage for newsletter subscribers. Either they get exclusive content, content that never hits the website, or they get advanced content. If I find, a great wine, they're going to get it first, and maybe I won't put it on the website for 2 or 3 weeks. So they'll have a little head start if they're looking for it, and special announcements like that about the tour.
And the other thing I want to say is, you mentioned it at the beginning when you talked about the website, the recipes, over 200 of them. The biggest thing I enjoy about your recipes is, here in America, at least, we have this, in our mind, this perception of Italian food, right? It's spaghetti, it's lasagna, it's things like this that we see everywhere. One that I don't think is necessarily Italian, chicken Alfredo, all this kind of stuff. What I love about your website is when I'm going, okay, I want something Italian, but I want something I've never heard of or made before. I go to your recipes, and that's where I look through, and you have them very well organized, depending on what type of protein and thing you want to cook with. But you have some great recipes in there for different things that I'm telling you, a lot of you would not even know it was an Italian dish, but it is, and they're fantastic. Right. So yeah, a great place to explore when you just go, I want Italian, but I want something different. Go look at John's website. Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate that. Look, I use it myself, because I do the cooking for the family, and there are nights when I'm like, man, I don't know what to make. I'm like, well, let me look at my website, because I forget.
Yeah.
I've had so many recipes are up there. The older ones maybe be questionable how they're organized or illustrated, but the newer ones are all well illustrated. Because a lot of times it's about the process, not so much the ingredients, because Italian cooking is very simple. It's 2 or 3 really fresh ingredients, and if you're going to make if you have the urge to make pasta with broccoli rabe and sausage, and you go to the market and the broccoli rabe is brown, then you don't make it. You make something else. You find what is fresh and you use that. And that's what happens to us on the tour. When we're there, like last year, we had porcini every way you can imagine. All the restaurants were using porcini because the harvest for porcini, or not really a harvest, I guess the foraging, the conditions were so good that they were everywhere. This year was the black truffles were everywhere.
Yeah.
Because of all the rain, right? That was the one good thing that they did have. But it's Yeah, it's just simple ingredients treated well with the best quality of things that you can get. Whether it's the olive oil that you get, or that's probably another overlooked thing that people buy at all the wineries, because they all make their own olive oil, and it's just definitely a noticeable quality, an increase in quality over what you can find here.
That may have to be a future episode for you and I, just the foods of Italy, and just talking about all the different types of
Yeah,
dishes people can
we could do
make. I
that.
think that would be a fun one. I would enjoy that if you up for it.
Yeah, for sure you would. I know you
Yeah.
you cook like
Yeah.
crazy all the time. I mean, yeah, I'd have to actually do a little bit of homework for that one, get organized, but that would be pretty fun.
Yeah, let's we'll
Yeah.
we'll tease that out to everybody listening, that look for that down the road in the next few months. We'll try to put that together and get that episode out for sure.
Sounds good.
John, thanks so much as always for coming on and doing the show today.
Yeah, I mean, I love doing it. I'll tell you, time flew by.
Yeah, it's fun when we can just have a conversation.
Exactly.
Thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey. And until our next episode, enjoy your next pour.